Today on Alex Autos, we're out here taking a look at the 2015 Volkswagen Beetle, also known as the VW Bug, and the model we're taking a look at here is the 1.8T model. There was a time where the Beetle was all about being one of the least expensive modes of transportation around, but that has actually changed, and the Beetle really is more about style than practicality these days. Because if you want a practical Volkswagen hatchback, that really would be the Volkswagen Golf. This is priced about the same as a Volkswagen Golf, and depending on the configuration, it's actually a little bit more expensive than the Volkswagen Jetta. Now, selling on style is not necessarily a bad thing because that's largely what Mini sells their Mini Cooper on. So you can sort of place this in the same kind of category as that Mini Cooper. The first generation of the new Beetle was definitely a cute vehicle. It had that very bubbly round profile. People put eyelashes on the front. With this generation of the new Beetle, however, Volkswagen has tried to make it the bigger, bolder, butcher Beetle. That means that up front, although we still have a round headlamp, it's a little bit more oval than we had in the past, and we have more creases going on the bumper and on the hood section right here. The changes seem to make this front bumper a little bit more pronounced than the first generation of the new Beetle. It's something that I'm not quite sure whether I like. Let me know what you think about it down there in the comments section down below. The 2015 Beetle is just over 168 inches long, so obviously it has grown over the very old rear-wheel drive, rear-engined Volkswagen Beetles of the past. However, surprisingly enough, this is not that much larger than those old Beetles. It is, however, significantly larger than something like a Fiat 500, which is a very, very small vehicle for North America. In addition to lowering the ride height and making this wider than that first generation of the new Beetle, we also have this more severe kink right here, which keeps it from having that very bubbly side profile. We were told this is supposed to make the car look more masculine overall. Of course, we still get these fender bulges right here in the rear and in the front, which are very classic Beetle shapes. As before, we have a very curving tailgate, but of course, unlike the 1960s Volkswagens, you will find a trunk right back here, not an engine. A few of my Facebook followers were asking about the wheels on the Volkswagen Beetle. This section right here is a plastic hubcap, but this part is actually an alloy wheel. So these are a combination of alloy wheel and hubcap. The overall shape of the Beetle is iconic, and of course Volkswagen is known for design evolution, not design revolution, so this is instantly recognizable as a Bug. Perhaps the biggest change between the last generation of the new Beetle and this one really are these tail lamps that are no longer round. They have a sort of a round profile on the side, but they do end in a more harsh line right over here. Like many Volkswagen products, the backup camera is hidden right here in the Volkswagen logo, and we have dual exhaust tips on the driver's side. For 2015, there are 3 different engines under the hood. Things start out with the new Volkswagen 1.8-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. We're seeing that in a wide variety of Volkswagen models. It produces 170 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. That's mated either to a 5-speed manual or a 6-speed automatic transmission. There's also a brand new diesel engine. It's a 2-liter turbocharged diesel, producing 150 horsepower and 236 pound-feet of torque. It's a slight bump from last year. It's mated to either a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic. If you need your Beetle to scurry faster, there is a 2-liter turbocharged gasoline engine available as well, producing 210 horsepower and 207 pound-feet of torque, very similar to what you find in the current generation Volkswagen Golf GTI. That's mated to a 6-speed manual or essentially that same 6-speed DSG, and power is sent right here to the front wheels, of course not the rear wheels. I'll let you refer to the chart on the side of your screen, but in general, fuel economy is very good, especially in this 1.8T model. I have been averaging over a combined drive cycle of about 500 miles, just over 30 miles per gallon in this 1.8-liter turbocharged model with the 6-speed automatic. You will get better fuel economy in the TDI and slightly lower in the 2.0T. Now the takeaway here, however, is that you will find better fuel economy with essentially the same engines in the current generation Volkswagen Golf. Front seat comfort in the Beetle is very good, although I do rank this below the Golf and below the Mini Cooper, especially if you get the Mini Cooper with the extending thigh cushions. This does beat the Fiat 500 in terms of overall comfort, however. We have a manually adjustable seat with a manually adjustable lumbar support, which is a nice touch. I also have a very generous amount of headroom, even though the overall profile of this vehicle is not quite as tall and bubbly as it was before. In terms of direct Volkswagen comparisons, you will find about the same kind of headroom up here as you'll find in the Volkswagen Golf, but in the back we find a decent amount less room overall, decent amount less legroom, and about an inch less headroom. That means that the rear of the Beetle is an awful lot less comfortable than the Golf or something like a Kia Soul for sure. Interestingly enough, this rear seat is not much more comfortable than a Fiat 500's rear seat. It's definitely a lot less comfortable than the Volkswagen Golf. The Golf really has quite a surprising amount of room in the rear, and the Beetle, on the other hand, has a surprisingly small amount of room in the rear. My head is touching the ceiling if I sit back in this seat, and the Golf actually has almost 4 inches of legroom more than we have in this particular vehicle. That means I can very comfortably sit behind myself in the Golf. I can't do it in this vehicle. The cargo area in the Beetle has grown over the last generation of this vehicle. However, it is still a little bit smaller than you'll find many 2-door or 4-door hatchbacks out there. It's about 30% smaller than a Volkswagen Golf. It does, however, have a very nice shape to it. So we can put a 26-inch roller bag and a 24-inch roller bag in that position in the trunk. We have a little bit of cargo space right in front of that. And you could actually stack 2 more smaller roller bags right on top on either side. The rear seats do fold to increase cargo practicality. The tonneau cover is a fixed hard tonneau cover. I would have preferred something roller, but under this cargo load floor you will still find a temporary spare tire. The cargo area is overall quite practical for this size of vehicle, although this fender subwoofer does take up some of the cargo area. As we take a look around the cabin, keep in mind we are in an essentially top-end trim model. That means that we do get these leatherette seats in the front and the rear. You'll also find in the front and the rear plenty of body color matching plastic painted panels. These are hard plastic panels right there below the windows. We have an assist strap to help you get in the rear and non-adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. It's a little bit difficult to tell in the video, but the top portion of your screen is the body color painted section of that front door trim. It actually is sort of a silver that has a slight periwinkle tint to it. You'll find a large portion of hard touch plastics on the interior of this cabin that is a little bit different than you'll find in something like the Volkswagen Golf, which has a high percentage of soft touch plastics. Down here we have an interesting twist to the bottle holder. This is actually sort of a elastic section right here. You can put anything in there and then snap it into place with that elastic. Somewhat similar to the Kia Soul, the front speaker has a ring around it that is color changeable via a control on the dashboard. Honoring the Beetle's past, we have 2 glove compartments, one right here on the face of the dashboard. It's relatively small. So you have a roll of paper in there right like that. Below that we have a more traditionally located and traditionally shaped glove compartment. This is a bin arrangement. You can see we have an instruction manual, can fit a wide variety of things in there. This is also where you will find the USB input. So right here we have the proprietary cable with the Apple iDevice connector on it. There are a variety of different connectors available. Moving on over to the middle, we have a small storage bin right up here with a rubber mat in the middle of that. And then we have essentially the same Volkswagen infotainment and navigation systems we've seen from a wide variety of Volkswagen models for a while. We are told to expect the new Volkswagen radios at some point in the Beetle's future. We just don't know when that will be. Our particular Beetle model has the radio with the optional built-in navigation system, as well as a single-slot optical disc player. If you want to know more about this particular infotainment and navigation system, go ahead and click that link at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to a complete review of this system. Below the radio, you'll find the single-zone manual climate control. Our model has the heated front seats, and then down here you'll find the keyless go button, as well as a 12-volt power port. Our model has the optional 6-speed automatic transmission, down for drive, all the way down to the bottom for sport, 1 notch back up to drive, and then over to the right if you want the manual mode, up for up and down for down. Working our way down the center, we have 2 large cup holders. Unfortunately, this armrest is in the way. You can lift it completely out of the way like that and then use the other cup holder. Below that armrest, you will find 2 small storage cubbies as well. And there's another one right inside the armrest where you can put a phone, a wallet, that sort of thing right inside. This also ratchets into different positions, and when you ratchet it like that, you can put a soda underneath it. It just makes it a little bit tricky to get out, especially if you have 2 drinks in there at the same time. On the driver's side, we have a very stylized 3-dial instrument cluster with a fuel gauge, tachometer, and a large central speedometer right there with a multifunction display in the middle. The multifunction display is controlled via these controls on the right side of the steering wheel, change page buttons, up and down option buttons, and then click OK to enter. The multifunction display, of course, gives you your typical trip computer information right here. You can see we have been averaging a very impressive 29.5 miles per gallon, in addition to range, your distance, your odometer, etc. You can also change pages over to audio, navigation, your assistance systems, and then certain vehicle settings as well. You can also cycle all the way back to that digital display again, where we can get additional information like you're seeing right here. The Beetle uses a very typical Volkswagen steering wheel, although we don't find the aggressive grips that we find in certain other Volkswagen models. We have body color painted sections right here. We have volume up, down, track forward, backward, a dedicated phone button, voice command button right over there. It does have a flat bottom like you'll find in many of the Volkswagen models, which does make it look a little bit sportier. The 1.8-liter turbocharged engine makes a big difference to the feel of the Beetle out on the road. 0 to 60 now takes 7.5 seconds, but I think this actually feels a little bit faster. I was actually surprised that it was only 7.5 seconds and not, about 7 seconds or so, because it does feel a little bit quicker than those numbers would indicate. Some of that may have to do with this 6-speed automatic transmission. In the 1.8T model, it is a standard automatic, not a dual clutch transmission, but it actually feels a little bit more like a dual clutch than I had expected. Volkswagen has essentially programmed this transmission to be a little bit more kinder, a little bit more gentle to the clutches internal in the transmission, so there's a bit of a power delay between shifts. If you get the diesel version of the Beetle, you can expect the 0 to 60 time to take at least 1 full second more. And if you get the 2.0-liter turbocharged R-Line model, then 0 to 60 drops down to about 6.7 seconds or so. It's not quite as fast as a Volkswagen GTI. Although this is very closely related to the last generation Golf, braking somehow feels a little bit different. The stopping distances are a hair longer than the Golf because it is a little bit heavier, and the pedal feel isn't quite as good. I think the brakes are just a little bit softer than I would like. Stopping distances are relatively respectable, but it is easy to get these brakes overwhelmed if you really start driving the Beetle hard. And it's a lot easier to drive this Beetle hard than the last generation. The same sort of thing goes for the handling in the Beetle. It is relatively good for an inexpensive front-wheel drive car like this, but it's not quite as good as a Volkswagen GTI, of course. I'm going to give this a B+ when it comes to the actual handling score. The springs and dampers are set towards the softer side of the segment, so this is not going to feel quite as engaging as, for instance, a Fiat 500 Abarth or certain versions of the Golf, namely the Golf GTI, yet again. If you get the R-Line version of the Beetle, then things do firm up just a little bit, but it's still going to be a little bit softer, and you're going to get more body roll than you'll find in the Golf. BMW's Mini Cooper handles a little bit better than this, but I actually think the Beetle handles a tiny bit better than the Fiat 500. Fuel economy is absolutely excellent in this 1.8T model, and even better if you get the turbo diesel. I have been averaging between 28.5 and 30 miles per gallon in very mixed driving, with an awful lot of idling time in this Beetle, and that is quite exceptional for an engine that produces about 170 horsepower. Interestingly enough, this actually got better fuel economy than the last Fiat 500 that I tested. The Fiat 500 is quite a bit smaller. This also got about the same fuel economy as the Mini Cooper with the 3-liter turbocharged engine, but this 1.8-liter turbo is much smoother than the Mini 1.5-liter turbo. That 1.5-liter turbo in the Mini is pretty darn rough, if I'm honest. It makes the Ford Fiesta's 3-cylinder seem very, very smooth. Now, you should know that if you get the manual transmission, your fuel economy won't be quite as good, even though this is, again, a traditional automatic transmission. Cabin noise came in at 71 decibels, which puts this a little bit on the loud side for the compact segment in general, but right in line with its direct competition, being the 500 and the Mini Cooper. The Mini Cooper is a little bit quieter, but the 500 is a little bit louder out on the road. Interestingly enough, where the Beetle really excels is the ride, because the ride is definitely more polished than I had expected. I expected something a little bit firmer, a little bit harsher, and with a wheelbase that's this short, I expected it to become a little bit unsettled over washboard pavement, but that doesn't happen in the Beetle like it can in the Fiat 500. The Fiat 500 is such a short little car that it can feel a little bit unsettled. The same thing goes for the Scion IQ and the Smart Car, because, again, the wheelbase is a little bit short. On the downside, the softly tuned suspension does take a toll on the handling. When we're on winding mountain roads like this and we start putting it in corners, you really can feel a decent amount of body roll, decent amount of tip and dive as well. The tire choice that Volkswagen made for this vehicle helps the ride, but it does hinder the handling just a little bit. These tires start to squeal pretty early in the corners. Overall, out on the road, the Beetle strikes a very middle-of-the-line pose all the way around, slotting right again between the Fiat 500 and the Mini Cooper. It's not quite as polished as the Mini, but it's a little bit better than the Fiat 500. The acceleration, again, is right there in between the two as well, depending on which engines you get. In my mind, there really isn't much direct competition with the Beetle, especially if you're looking at the Beetle with the convertible top. We, of course, have the Fiat 500, but the 500 is a decent amount smaller than this. We have a great deal less cargo room and less legroom in the front. Size-wise, the Mini Cooper isn't that far off of the Beetle, but the Mini Cooper is significantly more expensive. Even so, the Mini Cooper is probably the best direct competition because they're both going after a retro vibe. Of course, the Fiat 500 is, but for American shoppers, we probably don't remember the original Fiat 500, so it's not quite as nostalgic as the Beetle or the Mini Cooper. In my mind, the hardest comparison is also the one that's most appropriate and the most at hand, because that would be the 2015 Volkswagen Golf. They're right on the same dealer lot, and they're priced within about $100 of one another if you comparably equip them. Although the Golf and the Beetle use essentially the same engines under the hood, the rest of the vehicle is almost entirely different, because the Golf is based on Volkswagen's new MQB platform, and this is more closely related to the outgoing Volkswagen Golf than the new Golf. The major differences between the old generation Golf and the new generation Golf can be found mainly in the suspension and the weight of the vehicle. So the new generation Golf is a little bit lighter than the outgoing Golf. That makes it lighter than this Beetle right here. And the suspension also has a slightly better tune to it, so it feels a little bit more connected out on the road. When it comes to Beetle versus Golf, you have to decide how important the style is to you versus the practicality. Because the Golf is a much more practical vehicle. We get more room back here in the rear passenger compartment, and we also get about 5 cubic feet more cargo space in the back. That's about a 33% improvement. In addition, we don't lose any front legroom or front headroom, but we gain an awful lot of rear legroom. Performance figures are very similar, but the Golf is actually a little bit faster, even though we use essentially the same transmissions and the same engines, because the Golf is a little bit lighter. The Golf's interior is also a much nicer place to spend your time. We have softer touch materials going on throughout the cabin. We have those fabric-coated A-pillars that you find in most versions of the Golf, and overall it has a more luxurious feel. Personally, I prefer practicality over aesthetics, and that's part of why I prefer the Volkswagen Golf to the Volkswagen Beetle, but I also like the interior. I like the fact that we should expect the new infotainment systems probably before we get them in this generation of the Beetle, and we also get a price tag that is just about the same. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Volkswagen Beetle. Go ahead and click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. Check out those related videos at the bottom of your screen as well, and I'll see you next week.